Everyone, it's time to begin with our next panel discussion. And the topic is Fintechs as the enabler of global mobility. For the same, I would request the moderator, Mr. Mohit Mehra, Vice President, Payments and Primary Markets at Zerodha and Rainmatter. Let's have a huge round of applause, everyone, for the moderator, Mr. Mohit Mehra. And now I would request the speakers to join on the stage, Mr. Aditya Haripurkar, CEO at Hitpay. Mr. Ritesh Pai, CEO, PhonePe International at PhonePe. Mr. Rahul Jain, CEO at Peach Payments. Ms. Tracy Andersson, Joint CEO and Founder at Sendspend. At Sendspend. I would request the moderator to kindly begin the session, please.
Thank you. So, before we started, we got here, we briefly discussed how we want to be doing the conversation. Figured the easiest way to do it is share some questions with everybody, and then at the end of the conversation, we'll throw it out to the room. Any questions you have, keep them with you. At the end, there'll be some time, hopefully, that we'll have for the audience to ask some questions. You can throw some tough ones at Ritesh. No. And today, one thing we've been hearing about quite a bit for the last few years now is how, after having done UPI and digital payments so well in our country, when we travel abroad, we find this disconnect with how we make payments there as opposed to how payments are here. It's very convenient, and we sometimes also have become very used to it. But there are some challenges right now. There's some movement happening toward like a global mobility of transactions, but it's not there yet. And we'll try to talk about some of these challenges during the talk we're doing today. The introductions I won't do again, but what I'll do is I'll also, before the first question but I have for Ritesh, throw some context on what he is doing. So at PhonePe International, he leads the company and has been instrumental in setting up a bunch of things, even when he was at PhonePe. And just now he was telling me about, before his role at PhonePe, his role at Yes Bank as well, being one of the first folks really supporting UPI. So Ritesh, the first one to you. This is mostly about where we start the conversation from. When Indians travel abroad and we're not able to use UPI as much, when will that happen seamlessly, irrespective of where I'm going, to Africa, to Europe, to the US? When will that materialize?
So I think the efforts are on. Okay, as we speak, this is a journey that started, I think, around a year and a half back, when there was a serious push to take UPI international, right? Both from the government and from the regulators end. I think as we speak today, there are almost 8 countries that have been enabled, right? And I think in the next quarter or so, we expect another couple of countries to go live. So it's even if you were to try and compare it with some of the large global networks like a Master or Visa, I mean, they were also not built in a day, right? In this case, I think NPCI is doing a lot of heavy lifting, and I have a few of my friends out here in the audience as well. So it's not about the technical handshake, right? The technical part, sooner or later, you will get it right. But there are a whole set of activities that are linked to a transaction processing, including settlement, liquidity, fraud risk, customer grievance redressal, you need to iron out all of these. So in India, 9 years down the line, UPI started 2016, 9 years down the line, we have a story to tell because UPI is so synonymous with payments. I guess we are in the 2016 timeframe as far as UPI going international is concerned. Just that maybe we'll leapfrog that entire exercise in a much faster way as compared to the organic 9 years that it took for us to make it very synonymous out here. I think the way these handshakes are happening, I think getting the first 15 to 16 right, because you will have different flavors that will exist, right? Because we are so used to it, but different geographies have a different behavior when it comes to addressing digital transactions. So once we do around 15 odd countries, I think we will get the templates right, which means post that, activating any country will be more like a cookie cutter approach, right? I'm very hopeful that in the next 18 months, we should definitely see an upside as far as doubling the number of countries that have been activated so far. And the idea is also that, we end up adding more use cases. So UPI is not only restricted to our app users doing a transaction at a merchant location externally. I think an NPCI will be in a better position to confirm that, but we're also looking at the foreign inward remittances, the reverse acceptance of apps that are outside which could be used out here. So there are many more use cases, just like how UPI, when it started way back in 2016, started purely as a P2P, right? And today we see we can even go ahead and apply for the IPO. So those are the kind of use cases that we are looking at. So yeah, the short answer is maybe doubling the number of countries in the next 18 months.
One of the use cases that at Zerodha we're trying to solve for, but today we're not able to use UPI for it, is trying to enable investors in India to invest in abroad geographies. Mostly it will be the US, Europe, because that's where large capital market activity happens, but it could be anywhere. And there, if cross-border using UPI is available, it becomes easier to do it. This, apart from the traveling and the investing use cases, even when you travel, one part that you really will come across very often is small merchants you're buying things from, and would also now direct this to Aditya. Aditya heads Hitpay, that's based in Singapore, and he does payments work in Singapore, the Philippines. And mostly from a small business perspective, the touch points who you would want to be able to pay with UPI with there. Aditya, how easy would it be for somebody who's like a foreign national, an Indian who's going to Singapore, now to use UPI with mostly all small merchants and be able to make a transfer easily?
Thanks, Mohit. So I think there are a few things to consider here. The number one thing being, for the small merchants, the SMBs in particular, you need to almost provide them with the same level of experience that they would probably have with local schemes. So I'm based in Singapore, so we also operate a business in Philippines and Malaysia. So Philippines would have a UPI equivalent called QRPH, and in Malaysia you would have Do It Now. So essentially, we would provide a UPI just similar to how we would provide a Pay Now or a Do It Now or a QRPH. And clearly communicate the value proposition of it. And one of the first things that Hitpay did was essentially provide the native UPI QR there. So if you go today to maybe if folks here are familiar with Little India in Singapore, if you go down there, and if you go to one of the restaurants there, maybe an Anjapar or maybe a Kailash Parbat, you probably see a UPI QR there. So that's something that an Indian consumer coming from India would be fairly familiar with. So I think that's what we are doing. And there's a fair level of merchant training that needs to be done, because the fact is that local merchants there would not be aware of UPI. The other challenge that we face is there's also sometimes confusing UPI with Union Pay International as well. So this is something that we try to communicate to merchants. They're saying that, hey, this is UPI from India. This is like the WeChat Pay of India. So this is how we try to dumb it down essentially for the merchants. So I think that's the approach that we take essentially.
And do you think it's just an education problem that'll take time? There's no like faster way to do it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of education and awareness. So it's also not natural for tourists when they travel overseas to use UPI. So it's a combination of two things. One is awareness on the ground amongst the merchants, and the second one being sort of a lot of marketing dollars put into the awareness side of things. A lot of I can talk specifically from the WeChat Pay experience because in Singapore, you would have a lot of inbound Chinese travelers. And a lot of the merchants would come up to us asking for WeChat Pay, not because they wanted it, it's because they were scared of having a lost sale. Because you have a lot of inbound Chinese tourists. And if you don't offer WeChat Pay, you're losing the sale, essentially. So I think, as I said, essentially two things need to happen. The awareness from the Indian consumer standpoint, as well as sort of wide adoption in that country as well.
Actually, I have a question for Tracy now, so it's nice and. So, and this is more on the financial inclusion bit actually. So even though today when we make payments in the country in India, or if we end up in a situation where we're making payments easily in Singapore to small merchants, we're accepting it like into their bank accounts. This question is mostly from a perspective of what happens if, let's say, somebody who doesn't have a bank account and who has to accept payments cross-border. How do fintechs, how would fintechs enable that?
Okay. Firstly, thank you very much for the question, and I'm very honored to be here. What I'd like to mention is that the company is called Sendspend, and although you're asking me about e-wallets and payments, Sendspend, we've got 4 verticals. So we do open banking, we do remittance, we do, all of the above. But before we actually had this company, Sendspend, we had another company in Africa called Future Mobile. And for about 10 years, we used to make and manufacture mobile devices in Africa. So we got really first-hand experience of how difficult it actually is. I think what a lot of people don't realize in many, many countries in the world, when you deposit money into a bank account, you actually pay to deposit money into a bank account. And so therefore in Africa, we actually came up with a payment solution when we saw that so many people had difficulty in using the phones that we created. So Sendspend was born out of that. And to answer your question, we're presently doing that. With our e-wallets at the moment, you can actually send from one person's mobile phone to another to certain countries. You can send within 17 seconds. And what makes us different to anyone else is you can actually cash out that money for e-wallet from a bank or to any account that you want. And then we also own a payment gateway. And with this payment gateway, it's an A-to-A payment gateway, which means we don't use any cards at all. In fact, the premise of our company is that we're cardless. So it enables the merchant to actually send, and instead of sending an invoice, a paper invoice, he can actually just send a link to the person who has to pay. The person can click on the link and pay that way. So it's a very simplified method. We're doing this very, very successfully, and throughout the world there are certain areas where this is very, very prevalent already.
And do you see UPI plugging into that fairly easily?
Yes, I'm going to say something I'm not supposed to, so I can see the UPI in the audience. We're presently going to be incorporating UPI into our solution. I'm very honored to say that we have already had many talks. We're already on our way to do that. We've already integrated with the UPI and very, very excited. So watch this space in Q1 next year.
So we also have Rahul here, who's leading Peach Payments, and he's also working in Africa. His company is one of the most trusted brands there in the payments processing bit. And one question I had for you, Rahul, was in terms of payments, Africa has seen a very different trajectory. Yeah. Payment systems have evolved differently. The problems have been different, and so has the solutioning. How would you juxtapose Africa and India, or maybe the West, and the solutions that have happened there, the payment rails that Africa runs on, if you could run us through it?
Sure. I think one thing is, like, we talk about, you asked a question around financial inclusion, and I think one of the biggest challenges for inclusion is access, right? And so do you have access to banking? Do you have access to mobility? The topic is how is fintech an enabler of mobility? It's like, if I want to travel abroad, if I don't have a MasterCard or Visa, how do I make a payment, right? And I think that's the problem. It's a big problem of access. So if there's going to be, let's say, 200 to 300 million Indians traveling abroad, there's only 75 million credit cards in India, right? And that's a very small fraction. So I think the problem to solve from a mobility side is, how do we make that access easier? And if you look at Africa, luckily India is 1.4 billion people in one country. In Africa, I think I was talking to somebody and they said, oh, I didn't realize Africa is so big. From the bottom of Africa to the top is a 10-hour non-stop flight, right? Just within the continent. So, and there's 1.4 billion people across the continent, spread across 54 countries. 60% of the population is below the age of 25. So you have a very digital native population or a generation that's coming up. And what we've seen is leapfrogging of technology across this space. So there was no access to banking. So the alternative form of storing value became mobile money accounts. So people don't have bank accounts, but they do have a pseudo bank account, which is in Africa we call it a Momo account, which is mobile money, not the ones you eat. So you're seeing a lot of fragmentation in where people store value. So we did Peach, we do payments processing, so we have to accept any store of value that consumer wants to pay with. Across 17 countries, there were more than 300 different payment methods or stores of value. So the problem of Africa is not really, I can't generalize it. You have to almost look at it one country at a time. But the fact that there's so much fragmentation means that access and that mobility is going to be severely limited. So I think what we are seeing with the traditional networks, and no offense to our partners at Visa and MasterCard, but the problem that Visa and MasterCard were solving from a Western Europe, North America, developed markets perspective doesn't apply. I mean, in Kenya, 90% of the volume goes through M-Pesa. We do card acceptance, like we are pushing against a wall, trying to improve that, right? So the question is, how do you bring payments to where the consumer wants it, in the form they want it, and where they already have the store of value? Why do you need to force them to move it? So same for India and UPI. So I think the fundamental issue is the same. I already have money in this wallet. Why do I need to move it to pay if I have to travel or for an international purchase? How do we make it easier for these consumers? I think that's the juxtaposition of what is, the problem statement is the same. It's just the form of store of value is different in different countries.
And the most popular one would be the mobile money itself.
So I can, there are 3 countries that do card in a big way. So South Africa, 70% is card. I think Nigeria is one, and Egypt is a card-heavy market. Everything else in between is a spectrum of somewhere in the middle, right? So if you go to Kenya, which is the other end of the spectrum, 90% is one mobile money wallet. But everywhere else, it's 2 or 3 telco-led mobile money operated accounts. In West Africa, you're starting to see startups or fintechs create mobile money accounts even without being a telco. So Wave, you've got Wave, massively successful in Senegal, in Cote d'Ivoire. So it's a whole spectrum. We even have consumers paying with prepaid vouchers in South Africa for online purchases. So there's no most popular, but I think mobile money has become a digital wallet as such. Now you have people doing lending on top of that. You have emergency airtime. You have a whole bunch of services coming around that store of value.
So just now, some time back, Ritesh was mentioning about the obstacles that he faced while traveling in Africa. I had a question for him earlier, which was around the obstacles in taking the UPI payments global. I mean, even though we know what we're doing today, there would be few. And I assumed the answers would be around just the forex conversion or maybe the settlement fee, the commercials. But there were maybe more things involved. Would you want to talk about them, Ritesh?
Look, I think challenges will always be there, right? Even when UPI started, there was a challenge of educating the ecosystem, right? Now, that actually doubles up when you're taking that same payment ecosystem externally, right? So in India, we pride ourselves on the UPI piece, and it's so synonymous. Everyone wants to, use UPI. For the external merchant, right, it's just another payment method, right? To again Aditya's point, right? I mean, while Master Visa will be there, there could be certain domestic prepaid products or like the WeChats or the Alipay equivalent, which would be more prominent. And for the merchant, his life is good, right? As long as somebody is able to pay for the goods. I think the challenge is more to do with the on-ground engagement, creating the right amount of visibility, education, the reach part of it. And that, I feel, is a continuous exercise. That's not going to stop, right? Because it's not that one solution that we are going to launch. The way UPI has grown over the last so many years, I'm sure there'll be more use cases that will keep on getting added even for the international side of the business. So that's an activity that will be continuous. But the heart that I take from all of this fact is that it's an interoperable payment ecosystem. And again, to Rahul's point, right, while he talked about the telcos being the largest service providers in the African continent, most of them are very proprietary in nature. They are not interoperable. I think you won't find a bigger advocate of digital payments than me. And I can firmly confirm that, going the interoperable payments ecosystem will always give an added advantage, because the overheads of doing the education of the ecosystem also gets divided between all the players. So it's not like, unlike a proprietary solution where you'll have to go and continuously educate it, because this is something which you have only mastered it, right? So I think that's one exercise that we have seen. See, cross-border comes with its own set of complexities, right, as compared to a domestic one. So you're talking of two different regulators, you're talking of two different currencies, you're talking of two different time zones, and the behavioral issue is something that will remain. So it's not only about the transaction processing. That's the easiest part. Like I said, right, the technology part is something you will get it right sooner or later. But how efficiently you build a settlement, liquidity, the customer grievance redressal, that is what builds the confidence of the users in the ecosystem. Tomorrow, if a merchant who has accepted a UPI payment, say in Singapore, does not get the final payment on time for whatever reason, it's a make or break moment at that point in time, right? I mean, he will be so averse to accepting that particular payment piece. So we have to stitch all of those. Or for that matter, if a customer has transacted and the transaction got declined for whatever reason, if he does not get the money back, I mean, those are the things that need to be added. And that's, like I said, at every geography that you will go on launching, these are the things that you will have to keep on ironing out every time. I think to drive some of the other the acceptance part of it. What is happening is, and this is something we are working very closely with NPCI, is also to activate the credit side of the spends on UPI, right? Because internationally, if you see, everything is good as far as your currency is more powerful than the other currency, you don't mind spending it from your bank account. But when the currency appreciation is higher, especially like if I were to give examples of a UAE or a Singapore, the smallest of the ticket size actually translates into a credit card spend. So I think that's another piece that we are working very closely with NPCI. I mean, we continuously keep giving a lot of feedback basis the patterns that we see. So I'm assuming that maybe the early quarter of next calendar year is when the credit side of the piece should also get activated, which will give more muscle power to the end user to do that, right? I think last but not the least, and again, I don't know whether there's a right answer or wrong answer to this, the way some of the handshakes that have happened, right? So if you see NPCI, when they go and do a handshake, in some geographies, they have done a handshake with a network, right? Say a Nepal or a Sri Lanka. That works very well, right? Because there are two entities who are talking, and all the members follow the procedures that have been defined, and we have seen an uptake in those markets. Then there are other geographies like Singapore and UAE where they will go and do a handshake with every aggregator in absence of one domestic player not being there, right? So those means, again, bespoke SOPs that you have to do. Some may follow it very efficiently, some may not follow it, which means a fragmented experience. Third case we have seen where, in a couple of geographies where the tie-ups are with a regulator. There the takeoff becomes a challenge because regulator is not wired to do business. They can only be an enabler, but driving it down to the last mile are the challenges. So again, I mean, these are the three flavors that exist maybe in some of the other geographies that may come in. So to your point, I mean, it's a tightrope walk. Not that we can't overcome it. It's just that we'll require some time, effort. And the good thing is the Indian consumer is aware. He knows how to do it, right? The moment the merchant is able to identify or able to have the right decaling or the messaging at his, infrastructure, I think the Indian consumer will be very proactive to go and do that. So I see that this could be a challenge for the interim, could be overcome very soon.
And I would also ask Aditya to come in and talk about when do you think all of this would culminate, at least from your perspective? Because where you're at in Singapore, if I juxtapose that with Africa or with India even, Singapore seems to be financially very much ahead, has been at the forefront for like a long time now. So I'm hoping you'll be giving a very optimistic answer here.
Yeah, it's going to happen at some point in time. It's just a time frame, right? So is it going to happen like next year? Is it going to happen 2 years down the line? It's going to happen because you see a lot of movement happening towards that front. So also, just echoing Ritesh's point as well, I think it's also important to understand the local nuances of every country. So if, for example, you're coming to Southeast Asia is an incredibly fragmented region, right? So at last count, you probably had 700 different local pay methods, number one. And you also have national schemes on top of that. So you have e-wallets, you have buy now, pay laters, you have national schemes. And sometimes it's a bit overbearing for the merchant as well. So so as I said, it's going to be, UPI is going to take off for sure, in the next 1 to 2 years. I'm very optimistic about it. It's going to first happen for in-person payments. E-commerce will probably take a bit more longer. But in person, for sure, it's going to happen.
Tracy, before I ask you your question, do you feel the timeline looks similar in Africa as well?
So for e-wallets?
Yeah, for e-wallets, getting UPI transfer-ins.
I think that's exactly what you were mentioning. I think it's what people are used to paying. And at the moment, most people won't know this, but especially in South Africa, we've got the largest population of Indian people. Almost 5 million people live in South Africa, and I'm sure all of them have family, extended family, etc., in India. So if it had to launch predominantly, I'd say the first country they should launch in Africa should be South Africa. Because there'll be some familiarity where people will be utilizing it to send money home. But I think it will be quite a journey, as they were mentioning, because a lot of these e-wallets are already established. There's over 305 prominent e-wallets in Africa, which are used very, very successfully. And, you've got countries like Ethiopia, Somalia, where they've only got about 10% to 15% Wi-Fi. So, they don't really have the same options as anyone else. So, I would say South Africa would be the best bet to launch a successful UPI in Africa.
And do you feel mobile money itself as a long-term solution for handling money for payments, do you think it can truly replace traditional banking? Will things move to traditional banking now in Africa, or will it just double down on more mobile money?
No. So I think banking is here to stay, especially for very, very large money. It's secure. It's got all the securities built in, all the regulation, etc. But if you look at the flip side of that, you've got 1.4 billion people that actually don't have a bank account. And although our company that we're doing now, we are very much focused on open banking, etc. 1.4 billion, which is about 25% of the population, have no bank account, and some of them don't intend to have a bank account either. As I mentioned, you've got countries like Egypt or Philippines, which only 50% of them actually have bank accounts, and the rest run on e-wallets. I still don't think that e-wallets will replace banking. I think that EMIs, Fintechs, all the people sitting here are fantastic in assisting with financial inclusion. So financial inclusion is growing stronger and stronger every day because of fintechs and EMIs. So to help countries specifically in Africa, like all the methods that they mentioned, are crucial. I don't think that's going to disappear. Even people with bank accounts are using e-wallets because it's cheaper, quicker, faster. So I think the lines are becoming very blurred. In the past, we used to speak about banked. Now they're using terms like they're underbanked. And the underbanked really just highlights how expensive bank accounts are to use, how expensive it is to send money with a bank account. So therefore, even if you have a bank account, you're going to be using UPI, or you're going to use a mobile wallet, you're going to use all these other means. So certainly, I think banks are to stay for very much also the Western world. If you're in London and you talk to someone about an e-wallet, they don't understand it all. But if I was in Africa, I could be talking to the CEO of a head company, and they would be using an e-wallet. So I think, that sort of sums it up.
One more on Africa. Do you think, Rahul, any myths that you would want to bust about, any misconceptions that global companies have when they do payments in Africa?
Oh, that's a long list. No, I think, for us, Africa represents a lot of opportunity because, this is the traditional adoption curve of digital, right? I think if I look at it, transactions, commerce in general across the continent is about 3 to 5 years away from what we are seeing in India, in Southeast Asia. So now is the time for businesses to invest on the continent. I think obviously your traditional security concerns, is it safe? Can I walk on the streets in Cape Town? All of that stuff, are general myths. I mean, and that's the same thing. I'll give you an experience. I went to Brazil 2 weeks ago, and a friend of mine runs a global security company, and he tells me, oh, bro, get a armored car from the airport in Brazil. I was like, what is wrong with this guy? I went there, took an Uber from the airport in Sao Paulo, went to the hotel. So that perception people have of countries, I think that's a generic perception you always have about, what you read in the news and the myths that are. So I think as people discover Africa, as they recognize the opportunity, the consumer that exists, it's the next frontier market, everyone talks about it. I think the time will come, from a Peach and from our perspective, we feel lucky that we made the bet at the right time to be in the right place. And hopefully, as this grows, this is the next market, right? This is where the young population is.
I've got a few more questions, but what I'll do is, because we are a few minutes away from when we need to close the conversation, I'll open up the questions to the audience, anything that anybody here would want to ask. We'll take a couple. I think that's all we've got time for.
Hi. My question is for Ritesh. Ritesh, yeah, thank you. Hi, my name is Shivani. Ritesh, just from a pure UPI perspective, do you see the monetization angle, especially albeit for a merchant payment perspective, acting as a deterrent for the kind of acceptance that UPI has had and sort of is on an ongoing path, in the near to sort of later future, 12 to 24 months?
I think for any payment ecosystem to flourish, right, you will need certain enablers, okay? I think a lot has been made out about the zero MDR thing, right? But we also need to keep in mind that there's a lot of pride attached with UPI, and I'm not trying to sound very diplomatic out here. It was India's first homegrown domestic payment ecosystem, right? Traditionally, we have always followed whatever has happened in the West, right? Be it credit, debit, prepaid, internet banking, all of it, right? Here was something that was created purely for the Indian audience, right? The idea was it was built for public good. So when it is defined as something that has been made for public good, the whole idea is that you want to drive consumption. I think when Dilip and all spoke yesterday, it's a known number that we are a 1.4 billion population. But today, if you see from a UPI penetration perspective, we are looking at almost a 600 million odd user base who are there into the mainstream. That means we still have another 800 odd million that needs to come into the mainstream. So if that means that there has to be an added incentive to drive the consumption, I think it works. Will it be forever? Yeah, I'm not a big advocate of things being free. So I think at some point of time, better sense will prevail. But by which time people will start seeing value in accepting the digital payments. I think that would be the right time when the monetization can start kicking in. So I would say that maybe in a couple of years' time, we will have a different story to tell if we meet in a similar audience.
Rahul?
I just want to jump in there because I think from a domestic perspective, maybe, that's a different dynamic. Yeah. Internationally, the merchant is in the merchant ecosystem, the merchant is very happy to pay.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And they're used to paying. So even, when we launch UPI, it's coming to South Africa as well soon, but when we launch it, the merchant's willing to pay, and it's actually cheaper for them to accept a real-time payment cross-border versus other forms of payment, and it doesn't move their economics. So if it's for free, it cannot be sustained. People in the value chain, if you wanted to succeed at a global level, people have to make money in the value chain. So I 100% agree with Ritesh. If you're not making money off it, it's not going to, I'm not incentivized to do the dev on it and to deploy a sales force to go create that network that is needed for that mobility. Yeah. So
you need to pay the electricity bills, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to also just add something to that because I know you're talking about UPI, but you're also talking about payments of a different payment method. And in the previous meeting that they had on stage, they were talking about open banking and A2A payments. And we specialize in that. And the reason that people are so excited about what we have to offer is, again, sorry to all the people in the audience that are from card background, but for cards, they pay anything from 2.8, 3, 4, 5%. And with open banking, we're able to offer it at 1 point something. So it's a vast difference. So if you own an e-commerce site, not to have open banking payment gateway, especially Sendspend, by the way, quick plug there. But if you don't have something like that, for the companies to utilize, they can increase their profit margins, whether it's UPI or open banking, by 2-3%, which is enormous. It's an enormous change. So for the customer, yes, they're willing to pay as well. But I think what's going to drive the market as well is when merchants can see the benefits and they promote that to the consumer.
So everybody is for charging for payments. No free lunch here. We have time for just one question. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Dhananjay. I'm the founder of LedgerPay. So we do cross-border payments. So one of the questions that I had from a merchant's perspective was that, of course, card payments are very expensive. And UPI right now is getting out of the subsidy phase, even in India. But since it was a homegrown brand and like Sir said, we had very much pride in it, right? So the adoption in India was really quick and it was really great. But internationally, we will not be operating on a subsidy level. So banked populations, it's great for them. But underbanked populations, so let's say that I represent a country where I'm underbanked, and I'm visiting a country that's underbanked too. So दोनों जगह पे infra is less. So वहाँ पर adoption, how do you see for UPI? So is NPCI trying to build it like, are we trying to build it as a network like Visa or MasterCard, or are we trying to do something separate? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think, look, my always answer to such questions is that, tomorrow if I were to get into an automobile industry, I'm not going to start by reinventing the wheel, right? So certain set patterns or thumb rules exist as far as digital payments is concerned. I made a comment initially that, Master and Visa were not built in a day. But if you see the underlying premise on which it operates is that they act as a guarantee for settling the funds and resolving any customer grievances, right? So finally, how you manage your risk, how you solve your customer grievances. NPCI is going in a different way, right? But if you look at it from a bird's eye view, they are no different from a network because they are standing guarantee to resolve any issues, any conflicts, make good the payment to the merchant where the transaction is happening. In maybe 3-4 years down the line, when UPI will proliferate the way it is envisaged, where reverse acceptance will start, there will be cross-border remittances, inward, outward, all of it, you then make a very, very the entire ecosystem is like it will work on netting off. So your things about how much are receivable versus payables, I mean, all of that will get streamlined. Today, since we are taking baby steps, it works. Coming back to how the settlements, etc. work, it has got nothing to do with how evolved that ecosystem is, whether it's underpenetrated, whether it's a matured economy, etc. At the end of the day, the merchant has fulfilled a service for which he needs to be paid, right? The challenge could be how many merchants in that ecosystem are equipped to accept digital payments. That could be a question, right? That is a challenge for that geography to resolve. But I think the cross-border settlement piece, if you are part and parcel of that ecosystem, that will be taken care by the rules and regulations that have been described.
I think we're done on time, but I think we can stretch it slightly. One line closing remarks. Anything you want to say. Anything that we've not covered that you want to just quickly touch upon. Aditya, want to go first?
I think this is probably one of the most exciting times to be in cross-border payments specifically. There are a lot of tailwinds generally around this area. So I'm fascinated to see what happens in the next 1 to 2 years. And yeah, it always amazes me also visiting GFF. India is truly sort of the epicenter of digital payment innovation. So it's something that the country can be sort of very proud about as well.
Ritesh?
I think digital payments is going to grow upwards, right? And there is a serious amount of scope to grow, right? There's good news and there is bad news. The good news is that people who will recognize that this change is happening, accept it, and start building solutions can actually cream the market. The bad news is that change is going to happen irrespective of whether you are ready for it or not.
Rahul?
Yeah, I think, echoing what these guys said, but also I think real-time payments and, interoperability or creating networks out of real-time payments, I think that's a massive opportunity. And, so kind of what Aditya is doing in Singapore, we are doing in Africa, PhonePe is doing everywhere else. I think that's really the future. Is I think how do you create, we're seeing many more countries deploy RTP rails. How do we make those in a, work across the world? I think that's really the exciting opportunity for us.
And Tracy?
Okay. I think in the UK, we are very, very excited to be working with A2A payments. We've seen it grow dramatically from 6 to 10 to, I think it's at about 15%, heading to 20%. But also the exciting thing is that what they mentioned about digital payments, and we're actually working on a project at the moment where we are designing digital payments, physical digital payments for acceptance. So we've seen a gap in the market, and we believe in that growth, and that's where we are putting all our energy into within the next year.
I've got nothing to add, but I hope it was great learning across different geographies for everybody here. Thank you. You've been a great audience also.
Absolutely, it was amazing indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the speakers and the moderators. Please come ahead for a group picture.